Hey guys, Mr. Breen here, and in this video I'm going to be talking about poverty. Okay, so how do you define poverty? It might seem obvious to you. You might say, well, it's not having enough stuff in general. So you can't afford things like a cell phone and cell phone service and, a PS4 or something like that. Or maybe you define it a little bit more conservatively as just a lack of basic needs. So you can't afford food, housing, or shelter, or clothing, or something like that. Or you might define it sort of ingeniously, cleverly, as lacking opportunity. So maybe you have some of the basic stuff, but there's just no chance that you can make something quote unquote better of yourself. So how do we measure this thing? I mean, it seems pretty amorphous. Well, in order to try to get at any possible definition, okay, we tend to measure it in terms of income. So what we'll do is we'll have a poverty threshold, and that poverty threshold is sort of the amount of money needed to support a household sort of well. Now, this is obviously somewhat subjective, right? But no matter where we put that line, we definitely think that, say, $300,000 a year is probably enough to support almost any household, whereas, say, $5,000 a year probably isn't sufficient to support a household consisting of only one person, even in the very cheapest place to live in the United States. And just to make this a little more meaningful, this poverty threshold does depend on the number of people in the household. So you're going to have to make more money if you have 5 people in your household as opposed to only 2. And using the poverty threshold, we calculate a poverty rate. So this is going to be the number of people in poor households. Poor households divided by the total number of people. Okay, so why is a person poor? Why do people become poor? Well, one thing I often hear from students is, oh, a lot of them are lazy. Okay, maybe. From an economics point of view, that's not too interesting. Most people are trying to work to make their lives better, or to make their lives what they want them to be. So we try to look to other causes as well, because not all poor people are poor because they're lazy. Probably most aren't. Okay, one cause might be discrimination. So whether racial discrimination or sex discrimination, okay, or maybe religious discrimination, or, nationality or politics, political affiliation, something like that, right? And this stuff in employment is not legal, okay, but it does happen. It may also be because of a lack of education, whether it's because of poor schools, or lack of means to attend university, things like that. It may also have to do with your location. So maybe you're in a rural area, or maybe some kind of urban area, just places that are distant from job opportunities, educational opportunities, and it's hard to get there because maybe you have a car but it's very far away, or you don't have a car and public transportation is bad, and that could also pose a problem. Now, another related issue is the issue of inequality. Okay, so inequality can exist without having any real poverty, where people are starving and living on the streets, and it can still be potentially, we think, damaging, and it's at least something that we don't like. So what causes inequality? Well, there can be a lot of things. There can be, for example, differences in education, differences in skills and abilities. And there can also be inheritances. So maybe somebody inherited a lot of wealth. Okay, and more people are talking about inequality arising from social capital. So in other words, if you're the child of a very wealthy person, you're likelier to do better later in life, even if they don't bequeath you any money, we tend to think, because your parents raised you with sort of certain values and certain skills. Maybe they read to you a lot, or they found ways to put you in better schools, things like that. They just gave you habits that are sort of more helpful for getting ahead. So how do we measure inequality? Well, one very important way is through a Lorenz curve. So this is not going to be something I'll require you to know super in depth, but let's say that we graphed, share of, or total percent of income earned, which is the same thing as percent of GDP, and we'll have 100% up here. Okay, and then let's say that we had 5 groups, and this is going to be this one over here is going to be the income earned by the bottom 20% of people. So it's probably going to be less than 20% of income, right? Maybe it's only a small amount. And then we'll have the middle 20%, the top 20%, the richest 20%. Okay, and might look something, the top percent, maybe the top ones. Okay, this is all added together. So this might be the amount, this is the amount earned by the lowest 40%, this is the amount earned by the lowest 60%, or the percentage earned by the lowest 60%, this is the percentage earned by the lowest 80%, and then of course once you get to the top it has to be 100% since you're adding together everybody's income, and you get a curve that looks something like that. Okay, and then we can compare this to what it would look like if there were complete equality, and that would be a straight line, because everybody would earn, if everybody earned exactly the same amount, okay, then the lowest, the quote-unquote lowest 20% would earn 20% of income, the next would earn 40%, 60%, 80%, 100%, as always. So you would have something more like, that's my attempt at a straight line, but there you go. Okay, and inequality is the space in between the lines. So if this space is much bigger, okay, you have more inequality. And actually what you do is you calculate the area of that space using very cool sort of calculus things. And what you come up with is a number between 0 and 1 called your Gini coefficient. Okay, so if this area is really high, you have a high Gini coefficient, maybe 0.42. That'd be a pretty high one. Okay, and so that would be very unequal. A Gini coefficient of 0 means total equality. Okay, the difference between the Lorenz curve and the curve of equality, this is perfect equality, and this is the real thing, that if there's no difference, if it's 0, there's no difference between this and this. But if it's 1, that means one person literally owns all of the income, and everybody just goes like this, like that. So that would be nearly the entire area.